Hello and welcome back to another episode of Sitar Gurukul. Yes, it has been one whole year since the last video was launched. If I am not mistaken, the last time we uploaded a video was somewhere around March, and here we are in another year. In the same month, we are doing a video again. Not to be sad, in this 1 year we have grown to a much larger scale. We have even launched this Sitar Gurukul platform along with 13 others that are very similar. And we have come bigger, better, and with much bigger plans. More on that later. In today's episode, I am going to give you a lesson which is not a musical lesson, but a lesson nonetheless. Let me explain. So, in today's lesson, we are not going to teach you or show you something that you can play. Rather, we are going to have a very important episode on the maintenance of your sitar. Now, some of you might already have heard the term Jawari. Jawari comes from the Persian word. The word Jawari is a Persian word, and this means to give life, not to be mistaken with the term giving birth. So, what we mean, or what I think is meant by the word, is your sitar sound is going to die, which means it's not going to be as bright. And I'm sure you've all noticed this. Over time, your sitar is going, the sound is going to go dull. It's not going to be as bright. It's going to lose quite a bit of sustain, and that happens for a lot of reasons. For people who belong to our part of the world, India, Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan, so we have a lot of seasons, and all those seasons, when they change, they bring substantial change in the overall moisture content of the year. The kind of instruments that we play are still not exactly on par in terms of technology with the European counterparts of our string instruments, or even percussion instruments for that matter. For example, our instruments, namely tabla, dhol, flute, or even sitar sarod, if you look closely, there are three main elements to all of these instruments. You have some form of metal, you have some form of wood, or you have some form of skin. All these are extremely prone to changes in temperature and moisture. So, the sitar is no different. You're going to have the strings that are going to rust, and that's going to affect the overall tonal quality of your sitar. And then you have the wood, which makes around 80% or 85% of the entire sitar. That is also prone to changes in any environment that has substantial change in moisture, which we do. We have 6 seasons, and that is going to affect your sitar. Although how much that is going to affect your sitar, if it's little or a big effect, that's going to completely depend on the type of wood that is used, and also how long your wood has been seasoned for. The more seasoned the wood is, the more expensive the sitar will get, just like we have discussed in one of our first episodes, if I remember. The third thing that is very substantial to the sound or the overall tonal quality of the sitar is the bridge, and that bridge can be restored by the process which is called Jawari. So, in today's episode, I am going to show you how you can try doing the Jawari at home, and how you can try to master the art. This is also an art because it requires some serious craftsmanship, which you are also going to learn very soon. Without further ado, let's go on and look at how the Jawari can be done. This, as we all know, is the bridge. We actually have two bridges on the sitar. I've already explained, and it's pretty much self-explanatory what these bridges are meant for, but I'm going to say it once more anyways. So, the bigger bridge is meant to it's meant to filter the sound of the top strings. We have, in my sitar we have 6, in a Kharaj Pancha you're going to have 7, whatever the number of the strings. The main playable strings are being filtered through this bridge. The second bridge is doing the same thing, but instead of the main strings, it is doing the same for the sympathetic strings. Every once in a while, what is going to happen is, I'm going to try and show you. I don't know how much of this can be visible through this lens. If you want a closer image, I would suggest that you pause the video here or somewhere and zoom in, and maybe you're going to get a better image of what I will be explaining. Till then, bear with me. So, we are going to divide the bridge into three parts, three equal parts, and we are going to take care and look after them and do the Jawari based on those three parts. So, the first part, let me explain the first part. This can be the first part, this edge right here. So, if you look at it very closely, now is the time I would ask you to zoom in. You are going to see that the bridge is not entirely a flat surface. Rather, it has two curves, one over here, this is the portion 1. The middle portion is going to be the highest peak of this bridge, and the last portion is also going to have another curve. Now, let me explain why the reason behind that is. The first thing that we need to know is how the bridge is designed. The bridge is it's sanded down in a way that you're going to have the optimum tonal quality, which means it's going to have a substantial level of bass or bass. It is also going to have a substantial level of treble. So, the sound you are looking for, just like a digital equalizer that you mix during listening to music on your favorite music app, the sitar can also be, it can be customized in a way that you are going to have a rather bassy, sustainy sound, or you are going to have the iconic tingly and sharp sitar sound. I personally like a bassy sound, a closed sound as we call it, because that is the sound that I hear in Ustad Shahid Parvez or Ustad Vilayat Khan or the legendary sitar players that I tend to follow. Now, the first part, if you look very closely to your sitar, you are going to notice that right at the very edge there is a slight elevation of the string from the bridge. So, it is not exactly touching the base of the bridge, and the reason behind that is, before that, let me give you a demonstration which you can also try. So, I'm guessing that each and every one of our viewers by this time has a slightly extended nail on both of their pinkies, and that is to play the sympathetic strings in various ways. So, I'm going to use the pinky nail, and I'm going to show you that this pinky nail actually goes in around 10 to 15% right in between the bridge and the string. So, that is just to show you that there is a slight gap between the bridge and the string, and the reason for that is, I don't know if you can hear that extra tingling sound, the extra sharpness that my main string is giving off, and how that happens is, every time the more the gap over here at the edge is, the string gets more area to vibrate uncontrollably. So, there is no resistance in its vibration on the very edge, and that is going to the repetitive what say hammering of the string on the bridge is going to give you that zzz, that effect. That is also quite necessary. Right after that, you have the middle portion of the bridge. If we spread the bridge into three parts, the middle portion or the highest peak of the bridge, that will have a purpose of holding the string really tightly in one place. So, you are letting the edge of the string move a lot to produce that sharp sound, but right in the middle you are also letting the sitar not do anything at all, the string not do anything, you are holding the string. So, that is going to give you bass. And the last portion, just like a fishing hook, is going to be curved down again, so that the tension of the or the retention of the string, that is mostly the middle person's job, the middle portion's job, to make it, to enhance the strength of the middle portion. We are going to talk more about this in this video. So, if you are confused, it's completely all right. It's going to make more sense when we finally start to do the Jawari. So, without further ado, let me give you another perspective on what exactly I'm talking about, and maybe it's going to clear out what I just said right now. So, we are back to a new scene, a new perspective. I wanted to show you how it looks like from this topical view. So, bringing back from the previous scene's conversation, that we are going to divide this bridge into three parts. So, I am going to use this finger. This is going to give you an approximate measurement of the three parts I was talking about. So, the first thing, I am going to use my finger to measure out the first part, which is this, and my finger is right on the edge, and then the middle part, and the last part, or the base. So, this is for me. I have experience in this field of around 10 years. I've been doing my own Jawari, and I think this is a very important skill for you. Before I continue, let me tell you a story. So, I've heard that Ustad Vilayat Khan never used to do his own Jawari, and the reason for that is that he was a perfectionist. So he believed if he started to do the Jawari on his sitar by himself, considering that the Jawari has a substantial effect on the overall tonal quality of your sitar, he believed that if he started to do the Jawari himself, he's going to be so obsessed with making it better and better that he's going to miss out on the time that he practices, and that is going to ultimately affect his skills. So he was also very fortunate that he had other sitar makers, really famous sitar makers living all around him who would do anything for him, and he would give the sitars and they would do everything that was necessary and bring it back to him. However, it is not always feasible for us to get someone who can do just that for us, and you're watching these videos from all over the world. So it's not going to be feasible for you to find someone who knows how to work on your sitar. So these basic maintenances you can be responsible for, and eventually you're going to have that craftsmanship. Obviously, there's a very big chance that you're going to mess it up the first or second time, but slowly and steadily you're going to be able to fix this and might be even better than I am. So coming back, the first thing that we have to do is, usually what I do is I do the Jawari every 1.5 months, because I am also a performer and my sitar always needs to sound very, very pristine. But for students, even when I was a student and I wasn't performing much, I used to do it once in every 3 months for say. You could do the same, and sometimes if the Jawari is acceptable, you could just change the strings. I did change the strings of my sitar with the existing Jawari a few days back because I already like the tone. But for you, for times like this, when I do need to redo the Jawari, but not change the strings, that is the thing that I'm going to show you. All else, everything else of the process is going to remain the same. You either cut out the strings, or if you want to replace them, or you're going to do what I'm going to show you right now. So the first step is getting rid of the strings. In this case, I'm going to move the strings, and this is very, very important, by the way. So the first thing I do, in case when I don't want to change the strings, I just want to do the Jawari once again. The first thing I do is I'm going to loosen the strings, and what order you're loosening the strings and what order you're putting them back and tightening them is very, very important, because if you don't remember the order you did it, the strings are going to go, they're going to tangle themselves up, and then it's an impossible task to untangle them and place them where they belong. So the first string I'm going to do is the last chikari. The last chikari, I'm using my thumb to maintain that pressure, and I'm loosening the strings using with clockwise movement of the tuning peg that this chikari string is attached to. So from my side, this is the first chikari string. From your side, this should be the last string, which is the last chikari. So I'm done with the first string. What I did right now is I loosened the tuning peg, I brought the string up, and then every sitar or most bridges that I've seen has this slight extension, which is mostly for a design purpose. If you do not have that, the bed of the surface of the body right between the legs, on the end, the base of the legs of the bridge is still fine. But since I have that design, I'm going to use it in my favor. So I'm going to move the second chikari string just like this, like the previous one, and very carefully I'm going to place it right over the last chikari string. I'm going to do the same for the pancham string, which is the third string from my angle, and then I'm going to do the gandhar string, which is the fourth string from my angle, done, and I'm also tightening them up, so I'm not taking any risk that they're going to lose and go out of control, because that is that one thing in this process that you have to avoid at any costs. So this portion already has 4 strings, and I still have another portion of the bridge left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen the main string or the barge, and I'm going to attach it over here, and the Jawari or the jor string, I'm going to do the same over there. Now, I don't know if you noticed that my bridge moved a little. This is also a problem that we must face. Some of your sitars, especially the ones who have bought new sitars, chances are that your bridge is already very tightly attached to the body or the surface of the body of the sitar through some kind of a glue. But for people like me who have already changed their bridge once or twice, you are not going to have that stuck to the surface body of the sitar. Rather, you are going to have a loose bridge, and the problem with a loose bridge is that every time you do something to the Jawari, since the bridge doesn't move at all or much, there's a very little chance that you're going to have a permanent mark right on the surface of the bridge. It's still going to remain polished, and the problem with that is after you clean it up without the bridge, you're not going to find the perfect place to keep the bridge. Some sitars, of course, do have small holes cut out and small pegs that is going to show you exactly where to place the bridge, and sometimes you just have to bring it out of experience. You could use, if your bridge is loose, you could just use a pencil and give it a marking, and that is going to later help you in finding out where the correct positioning of the bridge is. Or sometimes you could also, in situations like this, you don't really have to do anything. Even if you have a loose bridge, you're still going to be completely fine, because the tension of the strings is going to hold down the bridge in place. So now I'm going to show you how to do the Jawari, but before that we must use this is our number one best friend when we do the Jawari. This is sandpaper, and this I belong from Bangladesh, and this sandpaper is not Bangladeshi. I do not think we make sandpapers. So the reason behind me saying that to you is this sandpaper 120D grit is probably universal. I have used multiple grit sandpapers, and I believe that 120D grit sandpaper is the best for the job, black or white. This is the way to go. So the second thing you do is you're going to make a nice clean cut of the kind of sandpaper that you're going to use. I do not have scissors around me at this very moment, so I made a rough cut, roughly this size. This should be a perfect rectangle, and you fold it up like this. Roughly, the size of this should roughly be like the divisions that you make, so kind of like this. It doesn't have to be perfect, of course, but it has to be approximately very close. So 1, 2 and 3. If you notice immediately that I do not have the strings, but I do have the markings that they have left, and the reason for that is all these strings vibrate in one specific place. Only the Nike or the barge string, since you have to pull it a lot, is going to have a wider area of effect. So we want to get rid of these grooves that have started to appear, and if you run your fingers through them, depending on how deep the grooves have become, you will still be able to feel the tiny differences, and we want to get rid of these differences. We want to make it smooth while maintaining that shape, and I'm going to show you how. Done. Jevin, শেষ। মাদি ভাই বোধহয় নক করতেছে, দরজাটা একটু খুলে দিও। না, টিউটোরিয়াল শেষ না, এখন তো জোয়ারি করা বাকি। So firstly, what we are going to do is, you can already see that I have kind of mirrored the position of the sitar. I do this because I think it's much easier for me if I keep the main string end of the sitar towards me while I do the Jawari. Previously I showed you that side of the sitar facing you, while the Chikari side faces me, just for the purpose of your ease of understanding. Before you do the Jawari, before you do the Reki, or you do the overall, when you examine what exactly you're going to do, I would suggest that you turn the sitar around in as many ways as you can, just to understand what's going on the bridge. And then when you have some sort of like this, the width of the sandpaper, then I think I would suggest that you keep the main string side to your side. That is going to really help in doing the overall jawari. So the size of the sandpaper, the width of the sandpaper, it matters less when I do it, because I have some experience doing this. I would highly recommend that you take the shape that you want. I would highly recommend that you take the shape that you want, but also the way I do it, I do not rely on the width of the sandpaper. Instead, I rely on my pressure of the finger, and I determine through that finger pressure where exactly I'm stroking. So I'm going to start to stroke. So you want big strokes and even finger pressure, and you want to do it against a good light source so you understand exactly what's going on. Depending on the condition of your bridge, it's going to take around 20 to a maximum of 30 strokes in total, with a good amount of pressure. So you have to make sure. A commonly done mistake is that the pressure does not reach all the way to the very beginning, and when you do not do that, the problem with that is going to be that if you don't do it from the very beginning, you're going to have an uneven shape. The curve is not going to be even. You're going to have two curves instead of one. So you keep on doing that. So after you're satisfied with the sanding of the first portion, you're going to have a lot of wood dirt or sawdust collecting, and for a better vision you want to blow on them, wipe it off with some kind of a tissue paper or napkin, or a microfiber towel works really well for cleaning the sitar. You could use that as well. And you want to do this against a good light source so you understand what exactly it is that changed. So the way I see it, I feel like I have achieved what I want. So now we are ready to go for the second portion, which is this portion, the middle portion. Now interestingly, the middle portion is where you do not need much work. When I do the middle part, we want very less pressure actually, because the middle part we don't want to damage it too much. We want to barely sand it down so it gets rid of the marks that were established because of the movement of the strings. Straight lines. So you have to keep on checking whether you get a curve like this, where the middle portion of the bridge should be the highest point. The edge or this portion has to go, it has to remain a little, it has to be a slightly, very slightly curved on the end, and the most curve we actually want on the base. So this is the portion. The curve, the system of the curve, as I was explaining, the first base, the base has to have the most amount of curve. The middle portion or this portion has to have the highest peak, and on the last portion what we want is we want the lowest possible. We still want a curve, but we don't want the curve to be too much. We actually want it a little upwards rather than a complete hill down kind of a curve. And you can't, obviously, if you want to curve it down, all you have to do is sand it down. But if you want the curve to be lifted up, the only one way of really doing that is not touching that and doing this instead. So you sand this portion even more, so automatically this portion is going to go lower, which is going to result in this portion being high. and I believe the first two portions I think is now done. So, I believe that we have reached a satisfactory level on the first two portions. Now, all we have to do is do the last portion. Now, the last portion is going to be the most sensitive portion because we do not want to mess with it. These two portions we can still fix. This portion, if you mess it up once, the only way you can fix it is by not touching this and doing this all over again. So, I am going to use the moral should be that you just want or the goal should be that you just want to remove the grooves that have been formed over time because of the strings, but besides that we want to make sure that we get as much height or upward curve from the edge. So, I feel like I have successfully done a decent, a presentable Jawari. The only way I could figure out if it really worked is by restringing the sitar, playing it for a good while and understanding the tonal quality or the tonal difference. Now, we are going to, this is going to be the moment of truth. We are going to make the strings, we are going to loosen up and tighten and reposition the strings just like we opened them up. So, again I am going to move the sitar in that direction. It's very important that we remember the exact order that we have done the loosening and tightening of the strings. We are going to do exactly that, but we are going to mirror it, which is so we are the last string that we loosened is going to be the first string now that we are going to tighten. So, I remember my order. Your order should be the same. So, first I did the main string and then I did the jor string from that side. So, this time we are going to do the jor string first and then the main string. So, loosening the jor string, positioning back to where it belongs. Then we do the same for the main string, loosening it up, tightening it, and then I did the Gandhar string. So, I am going to do the Gandhar string, then I am going to do the Pancham string, and we are doing the Pancham string, and then the first shikari, and then the last shikari, and then I am going to tune the sitar. And it is very important that you position the bridge if it has moved even a bit. It is very important that you take it back to exactly where it belongs. So, we are done with the Jawari. Now, we are going to do two tests that is going to ultimately tell us if whatever Jawari that we have done, if it had really worked. If it did not work, if this is not the sound that you want, then unfortunately you have to do it again, which is very normal. This happens. So, the first thing we are going to do is we are going to pick it up. We are going to look at the curve that is there, and from that curve right now people who are watching this who are going to do the Jawari for the first time, that curve will not mean a lot, but that curve is going, and after you look at that curve and after you play the sitar and you see the changes in the tone or the overall sound of the sitar, that curve is going to register in your mind, and that information you are going to retain. The next time you do the Jawari, you are going to understand if that is exactly the tone you want, If not, then you do a slightly better Jawari, which means the curve is going to change a bit. And once you get that ultimate tone that you've always wanted for, asked for, wanted, and you never really got, once you start to get that tone because of your own Jawari, that is going to, and when you look at that curve, that is also going to register in your mind. And every time from that point onwards, when you do the Jawari again, you're not going to need to restring the sitar just to understand if the Jawari had worked. That curve is going to guide you, and it's going to give you an instinct, a feel, and you're going to know instantly if the Jawari has worked. So we're going to pick the sitar up, and we are going to see with one eye closed, almost as if I'm seeing through the as if I'm aiming a gun, and I'm going to observe how the curve is. And once it registered, we bring it down. So I pick the sitar up. Now it's time to tune. Fortunately, to save your time and mine, I've already tuned the sitar. Let's check it out. Just as I thought, this is exactly the sound I want, my signature tone. And now you're going to notice that all the three segments, if I divide it into three parts that we have already done in multiple ways, this part, and this part, all three parts are not going to have the exact same amount of sustain. So this portion, the lower portion, is going to have a slightly big or a slightly longer sustain, and that is because when you play this portion, the portion of your bridge or the edge is affected in a way. When you play the middle portion, that gap closes because you're going, the closer to the end of the, closer to the bridge you go in terms of frets, the more effect it has on the edge of the bridge or the edge of the string and the gap that we talked about, and that is very normal. The perfect kind of Jawari or the perfect kind of openness, that is a topic of trial and error, at least for the people who are doing it for the first time or beginners in terms of Jawari. That problem does not happen to me anymore, but it is very normal. It is going to happen to you, and you don't need to be afraid at all. Every time you do the Jawari, you put the bridge back in and you feel like, no, you've messed it up. Absolutely do not be scared, because it's not that easy to completely destroy a bridge. It has a long life because sandpaper does not do substantial damage. So in every bridge you could do at least a Jawari for 200 times, at least. So I'm going to check out all the portions. I'm happy with this. This is okay too. This needs some work. However, when you feel like the end during the higher notes, if you feel like the sustain is a little less but you still like the tonal quality, I would suggest that for the next 7 to 10 days you have rigorous practice, and that practice is going to naturally open up your bridge because of the slides that are going to happen on the strings against the bridge, and that is going to damage the bridge, and that is going to give you the perfect kind of openness that you need. So on the next episode, I'm going to teach you the proper way of restringing your sitar. Till then, take care. Bye bye.